Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Liz Bridgewater, the Director of Outreach at Climate Action Now, and one of many people who work to bring this action party to you today. It will be just a few moments while people continue to gather. While we're waiting for more folks to join, I invite you to answer the icebreaker trivia question that I'll see pop up in just a moment. Alrighty, you should be seeing that Zoom pop up now. Our icebreaker question this evening is, what's your favorite name for the Trump administration's reconciliation bill? We've got some really creative ideas in there, so I'm excited to see what your favorite is. You're also welcome to share other name ideas in the chat as long as they're civil. While you're sharing your answer to the icebreaker question, if you're feeling up for it, please also share your video so we can all see each other tonight. We will be recording this action party, and it will be available publicly online. If you do not wish to appear in any shared content, please keep your camera off. We'll send out the recording tomorrow. If this is your first ever action party, let me give you a quick overview. An action party like this is an opportunity to learn about important environmental issues from people who are experts in their fields. In the course of the same hour, we will use the Climate Action Now app to take action together. The Climate Action Now app makes it easy to send well-researched, personalized messages to political decision makers and business leaders. To show you why it's so easy to take action with the Climate Action Now app, I will share my screen for just a moment. All right, so this is an example action like the ones that you'll have access to tonight. It only takes 3 touches to take an action. First, you touch Do It Now. Then you choose how you want to contact the decision maker that you're reaching out to. Because the app has your address, it knows who your federal, state, and sometimes even local officials are. Then you just have to hit send and you've taken an action. As you take actions, you'll earn points. When you earn enough points, Climate Action Now plants a real tree on your behalf. So far, Climate Action Now has planted over 400,000 trees together. Let's share the results of our icebreaker poll now. Kaylee, would you share those results?
Yes. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Kaylee Beam, Climate Action Now's Director of Content. And it looks like our poll might have gotten closed a little early, so sorry if you didn't get to participate, but I'm going to share the results so we can see what everybody else said. So we just have one question today, which is, what is your favorite name for the Trump administration's reconciliation bill? And of everyone who got to participate, it looks like the crowd favorite is budgetary boon for billionaires. And I'm inclined to agree, it's kind of the best option. It's short, sweet, to the point, and it has the best tongue twister potential. So thanks so much for participating in this little poll to kick things off. And a special thanks to digital creator El Cordova for coming up with these great and honestly much more accurate alternative names for the budget bill. Whatever you prefer to call it, we'll be spending the rest of the hour advocating against it together. And before we introduce tonight's speaker, I'm going to get us all ready to take some action. So let me just share my screen really quick. And you should be seeing it shortly. All right, so it looks like a bunch of you have already been in here and started taking action. Those are our action party regulars. They could probably do this tutorial instead of me. But if this is your first time attending, let me introduce you to our goal tracker. So on the left side, we have this cool little globe, which will fill in and iterate as we take action here tonight. On the right side is the QR code, which is what you're going to scan to get into the app. So go ahead and take out your phones or tablets, open up your camera app, and point it right at the QR code box on the right side of the screen under where it says Current Action. As you're pointing your camera at the QR code, a little bubble that says Climate Action Now should appear on your screen. Once it does, just tap on it.
Oops, and Kaylee, you're muted.
I got muted somehow. All right, if you don't have the Climate Action Now app already, tapping that bubble will take you to the App Store where you can download it for free. Once you have the app, all you need to do is follow the prompts to sign up, and it will take you right to the campaign titled Protect the IRA Climate Action Party, which is where you want to be for tonight. So I'll give everyone a moment to get in there. If it's not working for you, don't worry. You can also go to your phone browser and type in this link that's directly under the QR code, right where it says canapp/link/save the IRA. Alternatively, you can go to the Campaigns tab in the app where you can find it under the Politics and Policy section. And if you're still having trouble, that's okay. The campaign will still be open for the next couple of weeks, and we will share detailed instructions in our event follow-up email to help you access it. And just one last thing from me. You'll notice that most of tonight's actions are focused on the Senate, but you'll also see some targeting the House in case the budget bill ends up back there. So even if the text between two actions seems similar, they aren't duplicates. They have different targets. And I see you're already getting to work. Our goal is 500 actions. I think we're going to get there, but keep up the good work. And back to you, Liz.
Awesome. I love to see how many actions people are already taking. Let's keep it up. You guys rock. We're now going to transition into a presentation from Jeremy Liskar, the U.S. Legislative Manager for Climate Reality Project. As you hear from Jeremy, please share any questions you have into the chat. I'll pass the spotlight over to our moderator, Tim, to share an introduction to Jeremy. Over to you, Tim.
Hey, everybody, really glad you're here and really excited to introduce Jeremy to you. I've been in the halls in Washington with Jeremy, where he knows an unsettling number of people. So as she said, please put any questions you have in the chat, because in the second half of this, we'll be asking him those questions from you. So Jeremy Liskar is the U.S. Legislative Manager at the Climate Reality Project. In this role, he leads the organization's U.S. government affairs work and supports climate reality leaders in their legislative advocacy efforts around the country. He has a particular focus on public finance policies that accelerate a just transition to clean energy. Over the past decade, Jeremy has held roles in both issue and electoral campaigns. From Chicago, he holds a BA and an MPA from George Washington University. And because we have friends here who may not be familiar with Climate Reality Project was started in 2005 by former Vice President Al Gore. It's a nonprofit devoted to solving the climate crisis through grassroots leadership trainings, global media events, digital communications, and issue campaigns. Climate Reality works to spread the truth and raise awareness about the climate crisis. And it's where all of the cool kids hang out. So if you're not part of it, you should be, because you're obviously one of us. So again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And I'm thrilled to introduce Jeremy Liskar.
Well, thanks so much, Tim. And thanks to everyone here at Climate Action Now. It's so good to be with you all today. I'm glad to see so many familiar faces here too. I know so many climate reality folks come out to the action parties. It's really important, and we're clearly, running up the numbers already. So, pretty excited to be here with you all tonight. You have chosen a good time to take action and to get involved. Right now, we are in, one of the most critical weeks for climate policy in this country in a long time. You all know most of the story, as it seems most of you have probably been involved with Climate Action Now or with another one of our partner organizations in the space. So forgive me if I'm repeating some information to you tonight, but I wanted to just go over how we got here and this critical moment that we're in with the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which I'm now we're calling it the something about the boon for
I believe it's the budgetary boon for billionaires.
Yeah, the budgetary boon for billionaires. I'm gonna try to remember that and keep using it. I think it's much better and a much more accurate description than the one big beautiful bill. It's very ugly. But so like myself, many of you were involved in the previous administration in trying to get past our first major comprehensive federal climate policy in this country. We started with, the Build Back Better agenda, and we ended up with the slightly watered down but still really important Inflation Reduction Act. The climate provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act marked the most significant action that this country has ever taken on climate policy. And we were hoping and are still hoping to make that legislation huge in terms of impact, to the scale of $1 trillion or more in climate spending from the federal government to reduce our emissions have healthier communities, and make sure that we're ready and prepared for the climate crisis, and make sure that the just transition to clean energy is for everyone. We had a lot of you on this call as well spent the last couple years since the bill was signed working to spread those benefits in our communities, educating our neighbors on the legislation, on the clean energy tax credits that are available, on the consumer facing tax credits that were available to do home electrification and reduce our emissions locally. We talked to our local governments, our state governments, got them to take advantage of the incentives for them. Some of us talked to small businesses, larger businesses, but really this is a whole of society effort to take advantage of this set of incentives that the federal government put out there for us to transition to clean energy on a much faster schedule than what was the previous policy scenario. It wasn't going to get us all of the way there to our climate goals, but it had the chance with all of our work to get us within striking distance and to keep our goals alive. And that's a huge deal. Now, what we've seen since this administration has taken office is a pretty singular focus legislatively on cutting taxes for the very wealthy. And to pay for their tax cuts to the very wealthy, they're trying to revoke all of the policy that we passed just a few years ago under the Biden administration.
Hey, Jeremy, I'm interrupting because we blew through our first goal already, just a few minutes into this. So we're going to raise that tracker, but this is you guys at home making a difference. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Jeremy.
That's fantastic. All right. We're going to keep going. I'm looking forward to seeing really huge numbers on the screen here. But as I was saying, they're trying to pass the budgetary boon for billionaires and pay for it by cutting all of our major federal climate policy in this country. That is the gist of it. There are other provisions in the bill, lots of other provisions in the bill, but of course the one that we're focused on, as the Climate Reality Project, as Climate Action Now, are the impacts on climate. And there was a lot of hope, I will say, early on, that because of all of these investments that you all have been making possible throughout the country, these investments flowing overwhelmingly, by the way, into Republican-held congressional districts and states, creating thousands and thousands of jobs and economic activity, good wages. There was significant hope that this progress that we've made, these real impacts that we've made on the ground, would lead to a politically sustainable program here with our federal climate policy. It would be too hard to repeal these clean energy tax credits, these grant programs that are creating jobs and improving people's lives, lowering costs as well. However, that has not proven to be a big enough obstacle for them to move forward on trying to repeal the entirety of this set of policies. So while myself, while lots of people on this call, all of us have been taking action to protect the policies that came from the Inflation Reduction Act on climate, they are still trying to steamroll us. And let me be clear, they are trying to steamroll us, but this fight is not over yet, because the realities on the ground are still there. And those of us that have been making the case that these investments can't be taken away because of their benefits to our communities have been making progress. Not nearly enough progress, but we have been making progress in winning this political argument and making it politically painful to support the repeal of these programs. So that is the task of what we are doing, is we have to make clear the positive case for these continued investments for the economy, for lower costs for consumers, for public health, for all the benefits that we know come with climate action. but we also have to make it politically very difficult um, for actors in society to support the repeal of these programs. So, that's why it's great. We're not just, reaching out to members of Congress, which is really important, but we're also talking to the other stakeholders in society that are benefiting from this program and would hurt, if these policies were to be repealed, whether that's the business community, whether that's consumers, whether that's other stakeholder groups, and whether that's the media that needs to really cover the devastating impacts of this legislation for clean energy, for climate, for utility costs, all of those things. We have to make it clear that this is of huge importance, and that we can't let it happen quietly. So that's kind of my intro here. But let's get into some of the specifics of what's been happening. And I'm going to share my screen with you. I'm going to share a set of links of articles that I think do a pretty good job of illustrating what's going on both on the policy side and on the political side. So this first link here is from our friends at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and they put out this information on the impacts of the cuts proposed in the House version of the bill, which passed a few weeks ago by one single vote. Which, by the way, if you need another reason to think our actions here can make a difference, know that this bill passed in the House by one vote. All right, in a body of 435 members. So this thing is like, it's not a huge political winner. The polling is showing it extremely unpopular. So we need to keep going on that front. So the House passed this bill a couple weeks ago that amounted to a full repeal of these policies. Some were talking about taking a scalpel approach instead of a sledgehammer, and just trying to trim here and there and tweak some of these programs. But no, the House of Representatives, by a margin of one vote, took a sledgehammer to our climate policy in this country, and that really has devastating impacts. So to just go run through some of the
Hey,
stuff.
Jeremy, I'm sorry, but speaking of sledgehammers, the audience is apparently taking one to the Senate right now because we've blown by our second goal of 750 messages sent already. So we're cranking it up again. You guys are doing amazing. Thank you.
Yeah,
All
great
right.
job. I'm gonna have to set a more ambitious one, I think. So I'll bump it up to 1250 this time. Great work, everybody.
All right, fantastic. Yeah, let's keep moving the goalposts here. Make it even harder. Okay, so anyway, back to this bill and what it's going to do here. You see the top lines are pretty clear, right? It's going to raise energy costs for households, businesses, and schools. It's going to threaten economic opportunity, especially in vulnerable communities. We see the stat. This could cost 330,000 jobs in the solar industry alone by 2028, which is more than 8 times the number of US coal miners. It's a pretty massive impact at scale. It's going to, of course, increase air and climate pollution, which is going to make people sicker. The IRA programs could help reduce air pollution by 36% by 2030. And of course, that could be almost entirely wiped away by the actions that the Congress is taking right now. So what's in this bill exactly as it relates to climate? In the House version of the bill, there was essentially a nearly complete elimination of the clean energy and electric vehicle tax credits. And that's where the majority of the emissions reduction impacts were going to come from in this bill and are coming from. The clean energy tax credits, almost across the board, were with the language in this bill, were set to end within 2 months of it being signed into law, right? They put in place a 60-day period for clean energy projects to be placed in service in order to receive the tax credits before they would be zeroed out completely. That's true for solar, that's true for wind, that's true for a set of other clean energy technologies. Electric vehicle tax credits also, pretty much straight to the gutter here. So that was that's a sledgehammer. That's a sledgehammer, folks. Not what some of even Republican leaders were promising and calling for. There were also cuts to clean energy and energy efficiency programs. There was the elimination of environmental justice programs and cuts to pollution reduction funding. There were cuts to transportation health and safety programs, cuts to resiliency efforts, and of course, new policies that were favoring fossil fuels and making it even easier to continue to pollute and increase emissions in this country. Another study that was put out about the impact of the House version of the bill was from the Repeat Project that I believe is out of Princeton University. And I'll share these links, by the way, later if you want to go look at some of the details. But this legislation would increase emissions by 500 million metric tons per year in 2030 and more than 1 billion metric tons per year in 2035. It would raise U.S. household and business energy expenditures by $25 billion annually in 2030 and over $50 billion in 2035. Increase average U.S. household energy costs by roughly $100 to $160 per household per year in 2030, and roughly $270 to $415 per household per year in 2035. You can go and read about these other impacts too, but these are obviously some of the more important top line ones with both the climate impacts and the cost impacts. But you get the point. Extremely devastating and should be a major political liability for whoever supports it. Okay, so House passes it. We get all these analyses about the terrible impacts, and this bill is on to the Senate. This has all happened in the last few weeks. The Senate, there's a bunch of talk out there that the Senate is going to potentially make the House bill less bad for climate, less bad for some other issues, and moderate the repeal. Go back to perhaps this scalpel rather than sledgehammer approach. Well, we have been waiting on the text from the Senate that they were going to consider, and the Senate Finance Committee text, which includes the clean energy tax credits, that was just released this week, so I can share with you some of the details of that. But throughout the last couple of weeks, we've heard from a handful of Republican senators saying that they want to moderate this bill a little bit. They think the clean energy tax credits should not be phased out immediately, like the House version of the bill. They think certain technologies should be treated better. So there was a bit of optimism, and a lot of what they were saying publicly came as a result of pressure from people like you, from the clean energy industry, from other advocates around the country, saying, this can't stand. So we were in a position where, we thought that there are reasons for hope here and reasons for us to continue pushing really hard, so that we could moderate the impact of this bill at least, if not kill it, because that would be, of course, the ideal situation here. So this week we get the Senate Finance Committee text, which, to be clear, is not the final text that the Senate is going to vote on, but it is kind of it's the starting point for negotiations, and represents something that is close to what the Republican Senate leadership think can pass the Senate and also pass the House, which of course they still have to deal with. If they change, since they're changing the text of the House bill, they have to get the House's support again. But for now, it's with the Senate. So here's what happened. We made a little bit of progress, but not enough, not nearly enough progress. The Senate Republicans, as you can see here with this Politico article, the headline says they eased the gutting of the energy tax credits, but still targeted wind and solar. Now let me be a little bit more specific about what that means. Like I just told you, the House version of the bill for the clean energy, for most of the clean energy tax credits, um, zeroed them out nearly immediately. Said like, within 2 months of this bill being signed into law, you have to place your projects in service in order to get tax credits. And then if you do it after those 2 months, then you'll get nothing. And that was really going to pull the rug out from under these businesses, these clean energy companies that have been investing in America, investing in communities, planning projects that were supposed to get these tax credits that were supposed to last, through the decade at least. And now all of a sudden they're being told, actually, you have to do this within a couple months or you're getting $0. And all of the planning and time and money that you spent planning to invest in communities is going to be lost money, essentially. What the Senate has done here with their opening proposal is for solar and wind, they slightly increase the phase out time over the next 2 to 3 years. So instead of the 60-day place in service requirement, they say you can get this tax credit in full, I believe, if construction starts by the end of 2025. In 2026, you can get 60% of the value of the tax credit. In 2027, you can get 20% of the value of the tax credit. In 2028 and beyond, you're getting zero. So, they listened to some pressure and they made the bill slightly less bad, but still really bad because, this is still a completely, massive sledgehammer to the solar and wind industry in particular. And the industry is really crying out and making clear, like, this would, really decimate what we're trying to do here. And it treats them differently than it treats all these other energy sources. Of course, the fossil fuel industry is still getting their subsidies. And one other interesting thing that changed from the House to the Senate version of this bill is that a couple other clean technologies got carved out from their cuts, again in response to the pressure that people like you have been putting on them. So that includes geothermal went from getting cut off in the House version of the bill to having their full tax credit in the Senate version. Same is true of energy storage. So batteries, get their tax credit now. So you guys are doing the work, and we're seeing a little bit of progress. But
they're doing the work. They reached another goal. That's how much work they're doing, Jeremy.
Wow.
Way to go, you guys. It's amazing.
Incredible. Fantastic. Yeah. So you're doing the work quite literally. Really can't emphasize that enough. And it is resulting in policy change at the federal level. Now, I really want to be clear here. This bill is still devastating. It is still a death sentence for much of the clean energy that needs to get built in order for us to get on track for our climate goals in this country. It still is. It's still a terrible bill, and for lots of other reasons beyond climate. But I don't think we should underplay the fact that it is changing in response to pressure from the community. So we have to know that we are making an impact. We're winning on some arguments here, but of course it's not nearly enough. So that was kind of what happened this week. That was the big news. And I'll kind of scroll through here and see if there's any other important information to share really quick before we move to our next link on some of the political situation. Okay, yeah. So here's something that's interesting for you. So Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, a Republican, he had been one of the handful of Republican senators who had said publicly, the House version of this bill goes too far. It goes too far, and we have to moderate it in the Senate and be more careful about the clean energy tax credits. So if you see this quote here, that he was generally satisfied with this new version of the bill. That should alarm you, especially if you live in North Carolina. If you're a constituent of Tom Tillis, you should not be happy that he went from saying, the clean energy tax credits, need to be protected to a significant degree to being okay with this new version of the bill, which still effectively, really takes a sledgehammer to the solar and wind industries in particular. So, if I was a constituent, I would be pretty upset. If I wasn't, I'm not a constituent, I'm still upset because this guy is, one of a handful of people in charge of federal policy in this country, and he's saying that this bill that is terrible is still okay. So, that's the type of person that needs to hear from you all, especially if you live in that state. So that's important. The electric vehicle tax credit is still completely destroyed in this bill. That's important to understand too, especially for those in states where that have seen really a boon in manufacturing facilities because of the incentives in the IRA to move the supply chain for electric vehicles to this country. That stuff is still getting attacked. One thing that is not being talked about enough is that the consumer tax credit for electric vehicles um, had these important or still has these important supply chain incentives built into them. For a car to qualify for the electric vehicle tax credit, it had to be the materials had to be sourced and the car had to be built in America and in allied countries to an increasing degree over years, and that was really driving and is driving the investments in clean energy and clean manufacturing in this country. And what they're doing here would strip that all out. So that's really going to hurt a lot of people. Um, so okay, let me move to the next article here, or the next link. So this is a resource from our friends at Evergreen Action, great partner group. They've put out some really great resources throughout this whole fight. This one I think is really interesting for those of you who want to get more in the weeds. They analyze the Senate text here section by section, and it's really helpful to go through. But their bottom line is the same as ours, which is this bill remains terrible. They are trying to raise your energy bills and destroy thousands of American jobs. That's the message. That's really simply what's going on here. But you can look through this and get information on the specific tax credits and what happens here. But the consumer-facing tax credits are still completely axed. Solar and wind still mostly axed. So we have a lot of work to do here. Okay, back to the politics a little bit. Here is a little bit more information about what Republican senators are still talking about, what they might change in this bill, and why we still, have a chance to make an impact here and make it less bad at least. So here you see Senate Republicans look to ease cuts to solar and hydrogen credits. Let's focus on the solar piece here, because that's a technology that we focused on a lot. I know a lot of you have as well. So we have a couple Republican senators here on the record in the last day or two saying we need to salvage the IRA's support for residential rooftop solar. All right. So that right now in the bill that they have written would get, that tax credit would be gone. They would get rid of it. All right. It says 6 months from enactment, it'd be gone. All right. Including it would deny investment in production tax credits for solar leasing arrangements with residential customers. And that's kind of the structure of a lot of these agreements to build solar on rooftops. So it's pretty devastating. But the positive news here and why we think we have a chance to win back some of these things is here we have Senator Kevin Cramer from North Dakota saying there's some effort to adjust some of the stuff related to rooftop solar. All right, positive. John Hoeven, North Dakota. They're concerned about potential job losses for businesses that have sprung up in recent years and employ thousands of installers. So, that is a sign again that the argument that all of these investments that are going into communities as a result of this legislation can create political support and can secure these policies in place. But we really just have to push that message out and make sure people are hearing from us. Okay, one last kind of newsy tidbit for you on where we might have some hope is on the House side. Now, those of you who have been working with me over the past few months, maybe you'll get a groan out of this image here. But at least one member of the House, Andrew Garbarino, who's a Republican from New York, has said that the Senate's climate provisions here fail to meet the moment. Now, he has been one of the leading voices on the Republican side defending the clean energy tax credits. That being said, he and all of his colleagues never ended up opposing this bill in the first place. So they talked a lot. They said, we want to support these clean energy tax credits. But at the end of the day, pretty much all of them voted for the bill anyway. This guy in particular, he claimed that he fell asleep and missed the vote. People don't really know if that's true or not. But he said he would have supported it, despite all these things he said about the importance of the clean energy tax credits. But here he is today, criticizing the proposal for still being too harsh. All right. So there are some people still speaking out. And what we need to do is tell them, thank you for speaking out. That's great. But you need to go farther and actually use the leverage that you have as a member of Congress to make sure that this bill cannot pass without protecting the clean energy tax credits. So that's really the message here. You can see here he specifically criticizes that they changed the technology neutral tax credits to pick winners and losers. And by that he means the losers are solar and wind, and the winners they let nuclear and geothermal and a couple others keep their tax credits. But he's saying we should actually treat these industries more equally, which is also what we believe. So that's good. Now, to put a little bit of a damper on that, there are also Republicans in the House on the other side of things, which are putting counter pressure on that. Here you see at the bottom of this article, Chip Roy from Texas said that the gentler phase out of the clean energy tax credit in the Senate finance bill compared to the House version was a hard no for me. So he's been out here saying, actually, this little bit that you gave the clean energy people in the Senate version of the bill, that goes too far, and now I'm going to oppose this bill. He's been talking a lot, though, so I don't know if he'll actually follow through on it. Again, he voted for the House version of the bill after, talking a lot about what he didn't support. So we'll see, but these are the counter pressures at play, right? We have us, we have our allies pushing hard to restore the clean energy tax credits and make sure that utility bills aren't going to go way up, that these investments and good jobs that have been created throughout the country, but particularly in Republican districts, stay there, that our communities benefit from reduced pollution, all of those things and more. That's what we're fighting for. That's what a lot of climate champions in Congress are fighting for. And the margins are close. We're really, there's just a couple people who could sway this whole thing. So that's that's the work that you all are doing right now. That's the work that we're doing at the Climate Reality Project, is to make sure the message is loud and clear. We cannot get rid of these critical investments in our community. That's where we're at. And I'll stop there and happy to talk through any of the specifics and take questions.
All right. Thank you for that great update, Jeremy. I am going to give a quick refresher on how to access tonight's actions for any latecomers just before we move into the Q&A portion of tonight's event. And great work. You're all almost at 1,500 actions. I think we can go for one more little push after that. So keep up the good work. But yes, there's a few different ways to get into tonight's campaign. Obviously, I'm a person, but right now my screen is a QR code in our goal tracker. So you can scan that QR code. Just go to your camera app on your phone or your tablet and point it at the screen. That will bring up a pop-up that says Climate Action Now. If you tap on it, it will take you to the Protect the IRA campaign in the Climate Action Now app or to the App Store where you can download it for free. If that doesn't work for you, you can also type in the link under the QR code box. Just type that into your browser where it says can-app-link/save the IRA. Just like the QR code, this will take you to the campaign in the app if you have it, or to the App Store to download if you don't. Tonight's campaign is also easily accessible through the Campaigns tab in the app if you're a little more familiar with the Climate Action Now platform, and it's right under the Politics and Policy section. So just use the method that's easiest for you, and if you're still having trouble, don't worry, the campaign will still be open for a couple more weeks after this event. So thanks for letting me take just a little bit of time to walk through this again. I see we just hit 1,500 while I was talking up a storm, so thank you all so much. Keep up the good work. I'm going to bump it up, I think, one more time, but you're all amazing. So yeah, back to you, Tim. I'll let you take it away.
It's just fantastic what you guys are doing. Please don't be the person sitting there letting the other people do all the work. Please, the point of this is getting these letters out and making a difference. And the only person who can do that is you at your computer right now. So I'm going to throw 3 or 4 sort of questions together here because they seem to kind of relate. I noticed that the top lines in the article you showed, the first article, talked a lot about economic effects and health. Are those better messages right now than talking about climate change? Sort of related to that, Lisa asked, are jobs and economics emphasized in lobbying? And she went on to ask also, aren't the manufacturers upset? Are they also lobbying? And lastly, just because I'm piling your plate up, Casey asks, what happens to the multi-year contracts that already exist for fulfilling orders of solar and wind equipment?
All right, some great questions. First on the economic arguments, yes, absolutely. Like those are the arguments that we need to be leading with. We have to be strategic as advocates. Even though we're in this because we care about climate change, we know that the people we have to persuade don't necessarily care that much about climate change. But by and large, they do care to some degree about the economy, about jobs, about costs for consumers. So those are the talking points that advocates are emphasizing, have been emphasizing, and need to continue to emphasize. On the question of the industry and what they're doing, this is a major test for them, right? It's like the clean energy industry is a newer industry. Like they're less entrenched. They've been fighting political fights for less long than some other industries. But yeah, they see the threat to them very clearly, and a lot of them are very engaged, and doing what they can to protect the incentives that are allowing their businesses to thrive. So that's been a major help for our broad campaign to protect these investments, is the alliance with the clean energy industry in this fight. The question about what happens to the multi-year contracts that already exist. That's a really good question. I don't want to give you false. I don't want to give you false information here. But my understanding, my understanding is that there are provisions in here that make some of those pre-existing commitments more protected than before, but are still not in great shape. I'd encourage you to check out some of these links I shared, and hopefully they can help answer that specific question. But I can check on that for you.
Jeremy, sort of related to that, I mean, does the sort of whiplash in climate policy also leave you concerned about the ability of foreign nations and leaders to take our policy seriously?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's a huge benefit to having policy certainty, right? And we see that on the economic side, on the business side, with all of these companies that have been planning major investments in this country, right? Who are now saying you're pulling out the rug from under us. It's true with the contract question right there. They're making these investments and plans for investments years in advance, and they're getting screwed over. And it makes them not trust us, right? And not want to make these sorts of investments in the future, even if we do get some of these policies back if they're taken away. And the same thing is true with some of these other countries. Is it's hard to be a good it's hard to be a good ally when we are constantly changing our positions on things. It's creating a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of these a lot of countries were not happy with some of the IRA because of the incentives for domestic manufacturing here. But a lot of these countries also benefit from the IRA because of how it's written um, to qualify incentives for facilities and for the supply chain when it's built and sourced from our allied countries, right? So they were benefiting from it too. There's it intersects deeply with like trade agreements and things like that. And yeah, I mean we're really throwing a wrench in all of these plans and commitments. And of course, it's important to say, we've been participating in these international climate negotiations, and we've, in the past, under the Biden administration and under the Obama administration, committed to reducing our emissions a certain amount by a certain year, doing our fair share here as the biggest historic climate polluter. Not as far as advocates like us would want, but still significant, and we're making progress on that. And of course, we've already left the Paris Agreement again with Trump, or he's committing to doing that. But the IRA is like the biggest part of us coming even close to meeting those commitments. So we're kind of screwing the rest of the world here.
I would also just add to that that's not just a historic thing. If you look at how much the average American, what our kind of carbon load into the atmosphere is compared to the average person in China, we're still putting out way more. So this may be impossible to answer, but it feels related. Liz asked, how will this bill impact climate nonprofits through the United States? Are you seeing an impact in donations and et cetera?
Yeah, well, one thing that this bill does, we've had a focus on the clean energy tax credits because those have the best chance of being saved, and those have the biggest impact in terms of emissions reduction. And that was the largest part of the bill. But another significant thing is all of the grant programs that were funded as part of the IRA. And the grants were going to different types of entities throughout our society, whether that's state and local government, or whatever else. But it's also going to nonprofits that are doing the work on the ground, including partner groups that we work with. That in addition to the advocacy work that they might do, also are doing work on the ground to support the transition to clean energy. And this bill repeals almost the entirety of the outstanding grant money from the IRA. Now, luckily, a lot of that money went out the door before this administration came into office. But we're still talking about billions and billions of dollars. So that is threatening the nonprofit community for sure.
Marianne asked, Jeremy, what are possible ways to add to letter writing campaigns like the ones today to make a bigger impact? Are the climate nonprofits doing other actions that volunteers like us can participate in?
Yeah, so if that's a question about what can we do besides write letters and make calls, presumably that's implied. Definitely make calls if you can to Congress. we have been, doing what we can to encourage encourage the use of different tactics. That's really what a lot of research has shown is that when there is not just a groundswell of support for certain issues, but also a diversity of tactics, and we're really kind of pushing things on many fronts, like that's when we're most successful. So yes, please write letters, please send emails, please make calls, please set up meetings, please hit up your local media and tell them to cover this issue. Um, you can think of any host of tactics, but I'd encourage creativity. If you have a representative that is 100% opposed to this to what we're saying and is not going to be persuaded, then it's time to hold them accountable, right? And maybe that means rallies, maybe that means other sorts of visibility or like ways to communicate to your neighbors that their representatives are hurting them, right? Maybe you are writing an op-ed, maybe you're doing a letter to the editor, right? Like those things all matter and are all being, all those types of actions are being taken right now by groups like ours, by our partners throughout the country. And we're hoping that, this big groundswell of action from the American public is what can sway a few key people here.
Liz asked, why do you think Tom Tillis changed his tone and said he was generally satisfied?
Uh, well, I mean, they did change the bill a little bit, right? Maybe that's all he wanted. I think for I don't know what's in his heart, um, if he was saying some of these things for political reasons, right? Like because he wants to seem reasonable, because he wants to, go back and tell his constituents that he did what he could for them, the businesses in his community. Um, maybe he's trying to claim victory here and say, look, we got a couple things. I did my job, and now I'm looking for an excuse to support this bill, right? That's possible. It's also possible, he doesn't understand that this version of the bill is still going to destroy a lot of the things that he says that he wants to protect. And that's why our actions today and over the next few weeks are really important, is to continue to keep that pressure up. But yeah, hard to say about him specifically. But just that he's maybe looking for an excuse to say this thing is okay, and we can't let him.
I do want to mention that you guys did it once again. You reached yet another goal. I would say you're kicking ass, but I don't want to use language like that, but you are. So amazing. Are you seeing media coverage about the abandonment of investment in Republican districts that those constituents are able to access? Is that something that's happening?
Like I'm seeing a little bit. And like that's the goal. That's like the work that a lot of climate organizations are doing, is trying to get media to cover it. But look, I mean, you all see the news, right? You tell me in the chat. I mean, I do not think that the American public knows about the climate and clean energy provisions of this bill by and large. And I think the media coverage has something to do with that. It's tough. It's tough in our current information environment to get the word out to everybody, because people get news from so many different places. But that's also why it's important for us to reach out and talk to all of the different outlets and the different platforms, and people who we get information from. We really have to find a way to saturate this and get the word out. The public already hates this bill, but that's mostly they haven't heard that much about it. They maybe know about the tax cuts for billionaires a little bit. They maybe know about the cuts to Medicaid and healthcare for people a little bit, but I don't think they know about the clean energy and climate stuff for the most part. So that's our job to really get that word out there.
Jeremy, as we're coming up on the end of the hour, I mean, I first want to thank everybody who showed up here, who's still taking actions. And I want to mention these actions will stay up on the platform. And generally speaking, we see a significant growth in how many of these actions get taken in the days following an action party. And certainly if you've joined on, I hope you'll stay and use the Climate Action Now platform, because there are literally thousands of actions you can take, and they all make a difference. I wonder if you have any kind of final thoughts, Jeremy.
Yeah, well, actually, in the chat, Susie presents me with a good question that can wrap stuff up here pretty nicely, which is, how much time do we have here? Which I forgot to say. So the goal that congressional leadership and that the administration has been pushing has been, they want this bill on the president's desk by July 4th. Because apparently it's very patriotic to go and destroy the American economy and pollute everyone who lives here. That said, that's considered by most people who follow these things to be a very, very ambitious deadline. And what we're seeing is that there's still significant disagreement in Congress, even within the Republican Party, on what this bill should look like. Some people want to cut the entirety of our climate programs. Some people want to keep most of our climate programs. Some people want to cut Medicaid more. Some people want to cut it less. So there are all these issues and more at play, and this is a very live ball. So we have at least a couple weeks until this thing is done. That said, the sooner you can do stuff is the better. The Senate is getting pressure on them from the Trump administration to vote on this thing as soon as like a week from now. They have some procedural stuff to do. The parliamentarian has to rule on some things and whether they're allowed in the bill or not. But they're trying their hardest to get this thing done fast. So think about the next week or two is really like, this is your time to act. It is the next week, the next 2 weeks, but ideally the next week. And maybe if you all do it, if we work hard, then the disagreements persist and it can take and it can take longer and longer and delay it and eventually die. But the time to act is now. The time to talk to your friends, your family, your community is now. So you're taking the first step being here today, and I know a lot of you are involved already. So thank you for that, and I will, continue to be in this fight with you.
I want to just quickly mention before we turn it back to our friends from Climate Action Now that the thing I so love and admire about activists are that we show up, are that there's something inherently optimistic. And I think often about Dr. King's remark that only at the darkest time of night do the stars come out to shine. And I think right now we all are navigating by the starlight of each other's courage in this moment. So I'm so grateful to all of you, and we'll just pass it back to Liz.
I was muted, but thanks so much, Tim. That was a wonderful way to wrap all this up. I want to second what Tim was saying. It truly is everyone who showed up here today that makes the difference. Like, this event would not be what it is without you showing up and bringing all this energy and doing everything you did during this hour. So thank you so much for showing up today to do that. We'll send out a recording and the action resources for you and your friends to keep taking action until that, end of week deadline that Jeremy was mentioning. If you like what we're doing with these action parties, there's a lot more where this came from. The best way that you can help us continue to keep making more of these action parties is to become a Climate Action Now supporting member. We dropped some info about that into the chat that helps our small but mighty team continue to bring more of these events your way. Our next events that we've got coming up, we've got a plant-based action party next week to learn all about plant-based proteins from senior leaders at Beyond Meat, Good Food Institute, and Sprout. And then in July, we've got our next monthly Dose of Climate Hope series installment with a food tech investment analyst named Ishan Samaranayake. So we'll include those in our follow-up email as well. I want to share a huge thanks to our planning partners at the New York State Coalition of Climate Reality Chapters. They did so much of the work to get this planned and get the actions created. And a big thanks as well to Jeremy Liskar for spending your time and expertise with us this evening to share all of these wonderful insights. Thank you, everyone, for showing up today. You're truly the backbone of all of this. That brings us to the end of this action party, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night.